This is called The Monster Back Under the Bed. As Russia annexes Crimea from Ukraine, we early vintage baby boomers are experiencing boogeyman deja vu. I was born in 1946. Nikita Khrushchev was selected. Elected just doesn't seem to sound right. First Secretary and Premier of the Soviet Union when I was 7 years old. Short, stocky, bald, and as coarse as sandpaper. Khrushchev was a cartoon-like bad guy to young Americans without the humor. He projected brute strength and malevolent intent. This was the man who could push a button and send an entire third-grade class ducking under our far too flimsy desk. We glimpsed him on grainy black and white television news reports. We saw him proudly viewing the seemingly endless parade of tanks and troops rolling through Red Square with the menacing hammer and sickle flags waving in the cold Moscow wind. He was the great Russian bear, and it was scary. Occasionally he'd be shown with his common-law wife, Nina, who wore crude peasant clothing for almost every outing. It was also a time of frightening advances in the technology of mayhem. Intercontinental ballistic missiles meant destruction might only be hours away. ICBMs, one of the first memorable initialisms, were pointed across vast expanses of oceans by both the Soviet Union and America. Having a World War II hero, General Dwight David Eisenhower, as our president helped somewhat allay our fears. Then, on October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first successful Earth-orbiting satellite, and our paranoia literally went out of this world. How did this seemingly backwards communist country beat America into space? Would they drop gamma rays from the sky? Suddenly our math classes seemed longer and more intense. Paranoia ran deep. Thank you, Buffalo Springfield. Was the addition of fluoride to our water supply a communist plot to slowly poison our citizens? Was that reclusive neighbor who worked for IBM and had a telescope a Russian spy? Don't worry, McCarthy will get him. In 1958, Khrushchev warned an invited group of Western diplomats in Moscow that, "We will bury you." Although he meant it as a societal, economic prediction, an 11-year-old boy could only picture shovels and grave sites. It was all bizarre and troubling. Other real-life events added to the chill of the Cold War. On May 1st, 1960, an American CIA U-2 pilot, Gary Francis Powers, was shot down over Russia and captured during his spy mission. Perhaps the ultimate Khrushchev visual image occurred on October 12th of 1960, when the Soviet Prime Minister took off his shoe at the United Nations and repeatedly banged it violently on his desk to protest a delegate's remarks about Russia's actions in Eastern Europe. The U.S. Bay of Pigs fiasco, the truly near end-of-peace Cuban Missile Crisis standoff between Khrushchev and the new young American president, John Kennedy, and other incidents kept the Cold War from thawing. In fact, in September of 1968, when I reported for the first day of my 2-year stint at Fort Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska, I was sent to speak to the company commander as part of my orientation. "Do you know why we are here, Specialist Raftus?" "To work in the supply section of this infantry unit, sir," I replied. "You are here, Specialist Raftus, in case the big balloon goes off." The big balloon is military speak for a nuclear explosion. The captain continued, "After the balloon goes off, there will still be a ground war, Raftus. And do you know where the closest Ruskies are?" "No, sir," I replied, not wanting to sound like a know-it-all. "They are right across the Bering Straits, and the first place they will head is to Alaska. We are here to make sure they don't cross the straits." Khrushchev was long gone, retired off to a dacha in a remote part of Russia. Brezhnev was their guy, and Lyndon Johnson was finishing out his final year, but the Cold War remained. The scared young boy peeking under his bed in Pawtucket for boogeymen now had an Army-issued M14 in storage in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, 4 decades later, after a long run of peace and perestroika with Russia, another bald but taller Russian leader is rattling the dusty old sabers. Putin's annexation of Crimea from the Ukraine has some irony. Khrushchev was raised in the Ukraine, began his political crime there, and in fact, he was the one who handed off Crimea to Ukraine in 1954. I worry that my 8- and 5-year-old grandchildren may soon be peeking under their beds in North Carolina, looking for the new Russian boogeyman.